Hi everyone, welcome to the final week of Introduction to Early Childhood. This 6 weeks has gone incredibly fast. The first thing I'd like to go over today are a few things that came to mind as I was grading your assignments this week. The first thing I'd like to talk about a little bit is the idea of having a dialogue with young children and of asking them questions. And I just wanted to alert you to the fact that developing higher order thinking skills through questioning is something that should be at the core of an early childhood classroom. So to give you an example, a question that is not open-ended and that does not really get into any kind of higher ordered or critical thinking skills are the kind of questions that are, what color is that? What animal makes this noise? Things that have very concrete answers or can be answered yes, no. What we really want to see in a high quality early learning environment are open-ended questions, things like, why do you think that happened? What do you think is going to happen next? Things that really get young children to think and to apply their learning to new situations. Also, I commented on a lot of you in your observations. A lot of you saw calendar time in your observations, and I sent quite a few of you a link to an article by NAEYC about calendar and how calendar can sometimes be really misguided. It's a staple in most preschool classrooms, most kindergarten classrooms, but I would ask you to really think about what it is you're trying to teach when you're doing calendar and weather. And if you Google NAEYC calendar, it'll give you a lot to think about what you're doing. From just one little thing to think about is calendars are in base 7. So 7 days of the week. What kind of learning do we do in base 7 other than calendars? So there are some people who have gone to something called a linear calendar, meaning it's just a straight line across all the numbers. So you're practicing counting, but you're not confusing that idea with base 7 because our learning that we do mathematically really is in base 10. If you have any questions about that, drop me a line and I can send you some resources to do a little bit more thinking about that. One other thing I wanted to bring up that a lot of you mentioned that is such a wonderful strategy in working with young children is the strategy of planned ignoring. I know that is really hard to do. In one of your papers, you pointed out that people have different tolerances for different kinds of behaviors. What happens in my class, I might think nothing of sort of even the noise level. It may seem like pleasant and busy to me. Whereas another teacher walks in and their expectations are very different. Planned ignoring is one of those things that has a lot to do with that tolerance. So really think about when a student has a behavior, sometimes by ignoring it, and not ignoring it once or twice, ignoring it a whole bunch of times, helps extinguish the behavior, especially if it's attention-seeking behavior. So I would ask you to think about that as a strategy with regard to behavior, keeping in mind children need to stay safe. You're not going to ignore a child, bolting off into the road. That wouldn't be an appropriate behavior. But there are many times where we really don't need to address behavior, that just by ignoring it, we can help extinguish it. So those are my notes from my grading this week. For our last week, we're going to be discussing teaching standards and supporting young children's learning and observing and assessing young children. They're both very important concepts, and it is incredibly important to be able to think about them in the context of the cycle of intentional teaching. So think about that as you're reading. One thing to keep in mind with regard to standards is very often educators and lay people confuse the different kinds of standards there are. So when we're talking about child standards, so that would be the Massachusetts Early Learning Standards or the Connecticut Early Learning and Development Standards, those are child standards. They're what children should know and be able to do as they develop. When we start talking about NAEYC and accreditation, those are program level standards. So that's what we want to see as far as the environment and how a program is put together. And sometimes it's really difficult not to sort of get the two of them sort of smushed together and mixed up. So think about that as you are beginning to do that. And you do have 2 assignments this week. You have a discussion about its assessments, talking about why they're important and talking about the different kinds of assessments that are out there. And your final assignment for this class is for you to choose a current issue in early childhood. I've given you some ideas. If you have an idea that's not on my list, um, please be in touch with me and run it by me first before you start doing a lot of research. So I want to make sure that it's, a meaty enough issue for you to really dig into this week. I look forward to hearing from all of you, and I do have one last favor to ask you. I did notice that only 3 students thus far have done their instructor course evaluation. And like I've told you in previous weeks, it's so important to me that you give me feedback. So I don't know who writes what. I just get a report as to the number of students that have participated. And I would really appreciate if you could take just a few minutes of your time this week and give me some feedback so I can become better at what I do. As always, I'm around if you need me. Email me, call me. We'll set up a time to talk if that's better for you than emailing back and forth. I wish you all of the best, and it has been a fabulous course. I've really enjoyed the discussions we've had, and I've thoroughly enjoyed reading all of your papers. I wish all of you the best. Those of you that are graduating, woohoo! Those of you who have some time to go, I hope you enjoy the other classes that you're taking. I am teaching a bunch of courses coming up this spring and this summer. Hopefully I'll see some of you in them, and if not, wishing all of you the very, very best.